Coming up on Cannabis Coast to Coast News with Alaina Pinto this week, Senator Rand Paul, a Kentucky Republican, leverages his power to pull the federal hemp ban from the spending bill.
What are your views on the DEA's proposed rescheduling of marijuana, and what role do you see yourself playing in ensuring the process moves forward responsibly?
So, Senator, thank you. And if confirmed, it'll be one of my first priorities when I arrive to DEA to see where we are in the administrative process.
Just 1 week into his tenure as DEA head, Terrence Cole lists his top priorities, and cannabis isn't even in the top 10. Is anyone really surprised that he lied in his confirmation hearing? Plus, the Texas special session in the Austin State House continues to form the new regulations for the future of hemp in that state. And New York gets closer to the $2 billion level in sales, while over 100 already operating dispensaries in New York City may have to move from their locations, a compliance mistake that approved them to set up too close to schools. Plus, it's opening day in the tiny state of Delaware as adult use sales start on August 1st, and Massachusetts has a monumental day with the announcement of their plans for legal licenses for social consumption on site, at events, and for hospitality. And speaking of monumental developments in cannabis, 60 years ago, the Grateful Dead rock band was born in San Francisco at Golden Gate Park. This past weekend, the celebration returns for a 3-day festival with Dead Again, featuring 2 originals, Bob Weir and Mickey Hart, and John Mayer on lead guitar. This time, legal consumption of cannabis will be allowed and for sale. What a long, strange trip it's been over 60 years. All that and more on Cannabis Coast to Coast News with Alaina Pinto next.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to this week's Cannabis Coast to Coast News, WPCM TV's weekly production of telling the stories of the fight to end cannabis prohibition. I'm Alaina Pinto. If you really want to have first access to this show, you want to download our app available on Google Play or the App Store. It's PCM Space TV, and you can just scan the QR code on the screen and it will take you right there. First up, it didn't take Terry Cole long to upset the cannabis community. It happened in his first week on the job as DEA administrator. A week ago, he released his to-do list of tasks for his agency, and rescheduling of cannabis, or even the word cannabis, was nowhere to be found. But remember this soundbite from his nomination hearing on May 7th.
What are your views on the DEA's proposed rescheduling of marijuana, and what role do you see yourself playing in ensuring the process moves forward responsibly?
So, Senator, thank you. And if confirmed, it'll be one of my first priorities when I arrive to DEA to see where we are in the administrative process. I'm not familiar exactly where we are, but I know the process has been delayed numerous times, and it's time to move forward.
Okay, well, the process that's undergoing is to move marijuana to Schedule 3 under the Controlled Substances Act. So we're maybe somewhere in the process. Are you committed to seeing it to fruition?
I need to understand more where they are and look at the science behind it and listen to the experts and really understand where they are in the process.
We know where we are. We know what the directive is. Get it to Schedule 3. Are you committed to seeing it to fruition?
So I don't know. I haven't seen that.
So you're leaving the door open to changing course as to...
I'm leaving the door open to studying everything that's been done so far, so I can make a determination, sir.
So make myself a note here. No answer to that particular question.
Cole is just another politician who says one thing and does another. The bigger picture is that the prohibitionist movement continues to regain footing in our nation's capital. The prohibitionist movement of Dr. Kevin Sabet, under the veil of the nonprofit group Smart Approaches to Marijuana, released a series of ads urging President Trump to not reschedule cannabis because it impacts national security. Here's a warning: if you are pro-cannabis, this next clip will turn your stomach.
America faces a choice, and China is watching. Chinese drug cartels are already embedded in America's marijuana trade, profiting while our biggest adversary destabilizes our communities. If activists get their way and reschedule marijuana, it hands China an advantage and harms American public health. Rescheduling marijuana would actually give cartels a tax break. President Trump, don't reschedule marijuana. It's not just domestic policy, it's national security.
This is not the only group looking to continue to leave cannabis alongside heroin and LSD on the schedule of controlled substances that President Richard Nixon created in 1971. The fact that this commercial spot is running on the Fox networks reinforces the propaganda and misinformation of the anti-cannabis movement. Because of its federally illegal classification, no major traditional media outlets will allow any positive public service announcements. It's just another injustice practiced by our government. The same practice that was in place 88 years ago when cannabis prohibition started on August 2nd, 1937, with the passing of the Cannabis Tax Act. Here's Andrew Behringer with more on the new prohibition efforts under this new administration.
I'm Andrew Behringer with the Washington, D.C. report for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. The Drug Enforcement Administration is ramping up its anti-cannabis messaging, even as the Senate recently confirmed a new administrator. On Friday, the DEA's website, Get Smart About Drugs, shared an article from Psychology Today warning that cannabis use could increase the risk of depression and suicidal thoughts. The article, written by Yale professor Mark Gold, claims that cannabis is largely understudied and links youth use to mental health issues, citing recent studies that suggest a possible causal relationship. Gold urges healthcare providers to assess patients for cannabis use when evaluating for depression or suicidal behavior, and recommends that more research be done into the timing of cannabis use and mental health symptoms. The article is praised by prohibitionist groups such as Smart Approaches to Cannabis, SAM, which calls Gold one of the most distinguished professors on drugs and the brain. This campaign comes at a time when advocates see mixed signals from the DEA's leadership. Newly sworn-in Administrator Terrence Cole indicated that rescheduling cannabis would be among his top priorities, but recent agency action suggests otherwise. The DEA continues promoting messages warning against cannabis, from decoding drug symbols on World Emoji Day to campaigns claiming cannabis is a gateway drug. Last May, during National Prevention Week, the agency also highlighted memes allegedly harmful effects of cannabis, some linked to a group founded by parents whose children died by suicide after high use of cannabis. Additionally, in 2023, the DEA promoted natural high tips like becoming an Instagram influencer as alternatives to drug use. Despite this shifting political landscape, the DEA's messaging appears far from supportive of cannabis reform, signaling ongoing resistance from the federal agencies. Well, that's the Washington, D.C. report. I'm Andrew Behringer, reporting for Cannabis Coast to Coast News.
There is one politician who we can give credit to this week in Kentucky, and that's Senator Rand Paul. He broke from his party's ranks this week by forcing the Appropriations Committee to take the federal hemp ban off the agenda. That industry is now breathing a sigh of relief. However, the focus returns to the state of Texas, and that's where a special session of Congress is still working on language that will allow the industry to survive and not be eliminated by a complete ban of all cannabinoid products. The Texas Senate did approve a ban on all THC-based hemp products, but now that goes to the House, where there could be some softening of the verbiage in the latest SB 5 bill. It was SB 3, a total ban of all hemp products, that Texas Governor Greg Abbott vetoed a few weeks ago and called for this current special session of his legislature. That happened on the same weekend that Abbott vetoed the hemp ban SB 3 bill that did expand his legal medical program. Here's our hemp reporter, Kerry HInkle, to sort it all out.
This is Kerry HInkle with Bayou City Hemp out of Houston, Texas, and I am back again with another hemp report for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. This week, at the end of July, we have seen two major reports coming out of the hemp industry. One in D.C., and as we reported in past weeks, it is the Senate Agriculture Appropriations Bill that this time has completely failed in one attempt to ban hemp products. And it's kind of amazing that it was Senator Mitch McConnell, the original author of the 2018 Farm Bill, and single-handedly one of the few people in the Senate at the time to push through hemp language that has now looked to change his tune and instead ban the vast majority of this category. But his own statesman, and Senator Rand Paul, is the one person who has held up this vehicle from passing. And it's kind of amazing to meet with Senate staff and leaders and to understand the political process, and that one person over one issue can stop a funding package that is worth billions of dollars and impacts millions of people. And yet, that is exactly what Rand Paul did. He was not going to vote on this bill if Senator Mitch McConnell chose to include his new definition of hemp. And so, Mitch McConnell, the statesman that he has been, decided to remove that language and strip it from the agricultural appropriations bill. And we anticipate that he will instead take this fight now into the next version of the Farm Bill, whenever that may happen. And at the same time, now that we celebrate a win at the federal level, we also have to turn back to Texas, where yet again, the Senate, led by Dan Patrick, has passed another ban. Now, SB 3 was in the last session. SB 5 is the version this year. Now, slightly different in that it allows various hemp products like hemp seeds and hemp hulls, but still bans all hemp consumables that have any amounts of THC, and yet they claim CBD and CBG will be legalized, but if anybody's ever grown the crop before or sold a product, you understand CBD and CBG in any meaningful way will have some trace amounts of THC. So selling CBD isolate to adults 21 and over is pretty skeptical from the hemp industry. And so we are now looking to the House and what they might do. Do they adopt HB 5, which is yet another ban attempt from the House side, or is there any kind of substitute that may happen? And so the political maneuverings will continue to happen over the next 14 days or so as the next special session occurs. But if redistricting or other larger outside issues continue to happen, are we called into a second special session where then maybe hemp products are finally addressed, is still yet to be decided. But what we do know is that Lieutenant Governor is dug into his position to ban these products. The governor, with his veto proclamation, seems to feel the opposite way. And so which one of these two leaders will end up having the final say is yet to be determined. So again, as always, I am Kerry HInkle with Bayou City Hemp, and I will be back again next week to report on this crazy world of hemp.
The state of New York reached a milestone this week when they passed $2 billion in sales. The adult use market opened in the Empire State in December of 2022 and now boasts 436 dispensaries selling legal adult use cannabis. The news is not all good coming from New York this week. Many of those dispensaries have been open closer to schools than they were supposed to be. Of course, all of them went through the licensing process and got their locations approved, but that system was flawed. And now many will have to fix their location to meet that mandate, and many are in New York City. Not an easy thing to do. The Office of Cannabis Management has their work cut out for them in order to comply with a federal regulation of being 1,000 feet away from any school. A distance our Michigan reporter Amie Carter is very familiar with.
I'm Amie Carter here with Michigan Weedsters, ready to light up your week with the Michigan Report for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. Let's dive into this week's Cannabis Buzz. First up, Michigan's Attorney General Dana Nessel is pushing hard for Congress to pass the Safer Banking Act, which would finally give our state licensed cannabis businesses access to secure banking. This move could shift billions into safer vaults. About time, right? Local activist Chuck Ream, a familiar face at Ann Arbor's Hash Bash, is running for city council. He aims to stop the developer takeover and recently sparked controversy when his permit for a fun cannabis game night, Vapes and Crepes, was denied. Apparently, seniors can't vape and play bingo at the senior center because it's a public space. On another note, the CRA recently fined 25 cannabis businesses in June for infractions like sloppy advertising and unauthorized deliveries, totaling over $160,000 in fines. Looks like businesses need to keep it compliant to thrive in this growing market. That's the highlights for this week. Stay lifted, Michigan. This is Amie with Michigan Weedsters for Cannabis Coast to Coast News.
The California State Fair is winding down this past weekend, and for the most part, it was a huge success. This is the first time that a cannabis dispensary was allowed to sell their products and run a contest for growers. Embarc was the designated legal dispensary for this year's state fair, and executive producer Jimmy Young talked with their CEO, Lauren Carpenter, this past weekend.
Thanks, Alaina. We're so happy to have someone from California with us this weekend because it's been a big couple of weeks in California. First, the California State Fair opened up its doors and their patrons, if you will, to the cannabis experience. And that state fair only identified one dispensary to actually run the dispensary on location at the fair, and that would be Embarc. Embarc. And Lauren Carpenter, I won't spell her last name, is the CEO, and she joins us now. Lauren, thank you so much for pulling yourself away from another cool event, the Dead celebration, to join me for a few minutes. So thank you.
Thank you.
And tell me, how did you get to be picked? Is it because you're the best dispensary, you have the best stuff, the best prices? What was the political machinations here to get you in the door?
I think the true answer is because we have the most patience. So it took probably 5 or 6 years to get to the point of being able to actually purchase and consume cannabis at the California State Fair. But we really, I think, patiently worked alongside Cal Expo, which hosts the state fair, and the state fair board of directors, police chiefs, regulators at the local and state level. I mean, you name it, we've talked to them over the past 5 or 6 years to make sure everybody was comfortable getting to this point.
That's fantastic because in California, as you know, they just raised their excise tax again. So they hit you with another tax, right? They don't make it easy for you, even in a friendly state like California. How has that increase in the tax been working for your bottom line?
I think the greatest misconception that we've heard, I've spent months in the halls of our legislature having conversations with legislators about this very issue. And the greatest misconception is legislators who see this as a tax on marijuana millionaires, people like me, who they believe are just sort of cashing in by operating these businesses, not recognizing, of course, that we exist under a 70% effective tax rate, right? And operate on razor thin margins. So I think the most important and compelling conversation we've been able to have with folks is that this is candidly another tax on consumers, right? Another tax on everyday Californians, like me and my friends and my neighbors and my parents, who are already seeing higher prices basically everywhere, right? California is a wonderful place to be. It's a beautiful place to be, but it's an expensive place to be. And California cannabis consumers can't afford to just keep paying more.
And our governments at the local, state, and federal are just going to keep trying to get a little piece of the pie. And the problem is the pie is big enough for everybody, but there's a lot of people that like to have too much, more than their share of that pie. Would that be an accurate way to look at that?
I think there's a lot of ways to look at it. I think we're starting to see consolidation. So yes, we're starting to see bigger players. And I think there's sort of a fundamental misunderstanding of the economics when it comes to our market.
That's right, because they expect it to be $1 trillion industry, and it's at the $1 billion level now, and that should be enough. But what they don't realize is you don't see a lot of that revenue. Those margins are teeny weeny, right?
The very policies we're working to and advocating to change are often those same policies that are stifling the market from achieving its true potential. But that means we have to all sort of take a step back and operate on facts and not on feelings. And, that can be tough sometimes, particularly in politics.
Yeah, and that's where your patience comes in, and good for you. And I have a lot of respect for you. And I also am totally envious and jealous about where you are this past weekend, because you're at the Golden Gate Park where the Grateful Dead are celebrating 60 years of existence. The fact that these guys are alive and still able to play their songs and bring in a guy like John Mayer, who really carries the music. I mean, he's fantastic too. Yeah. I'm very jealous because I've always enjoyed. First of all, I'm old enough to remember 1965, okay, for the record, all right? And of course, I'm certainly familiar with the San Francisco sound back then and the whole history and everything. It's a celebration in San Francisco, which is exactly where it all began for them. So I'm going to guess, and everybody thinks this might be their final farewell.
Who knows? Who knows? What I can tell you is exactly what you said. This really feels like a full circle moment, right? To see this band celebrating with their community 60 years later in this park, in the place, in the space where it all started is incredible. And I think, we are the team that is bringing on-site sales and consumption into this event. I think none of us are surprised. Cannabis has always been at dead shows, right? But this is the first time it's been sold legally. And I think there's something really beautiful. We've really focused on bringing a number of small legacy farmers from the Emerald Triangle back down from the hill and into the park for this celebration, because there's this full circle celebrating. At the same time this band was starting is when these farmers were running up to the hill to escape persecution. And so to be able to see them coming back down and celebrating the band and with this community it's an incredible thing to see.
I'm going to play Do You Know with me, because I really only know one farmer in Humboldt, and it's Wendy Kornberg.
I don't know Wendy, but we have Wendy from Space Gems.
No,
So different Wendy, but an awesome Wendy, and also from the Triangle.
There you go. And she's with Cannabis Farms, and she was an editor with Skunk Magazine for a while. And I got to be friends with her over the years. And it's fun. It's fun to connect both coasts. And it's kind of what I always wanted to do. Massachusetts was the first East Coast state. And I have friends in California, and I've nurtured them. And now I have another one. And I so thank you for joining us and lending us a little local perspective on what is the most important thing to work with the community like you are. And you said the word, it's patience, right? It's you manage your expectations and you adapt and improvise to whatever comes in front of you, right?
Exactly.
Terrific. That's Lauren Carpenter. She is the CEO of Embarc, a dispensary in California. And we will have more of Cannabis Coast to Coast news after this.
As you might know, our executive producer, Jimmy Young, and I are both residents of Massachusetts. And this week, the Bay State finally announced their available licenses for social consumption. The social consumption license was part of the original ballot question that was passed by voters in 2016. And it took until this week to finally come up with the regulations for the public to comment on. These regulations will dictate the rules for that new part of the legal adult use cannabis market. And you can imagine there will be plenty of public comments. Here's Curtis Emery, also in Massachusetts, with more in his Bay State Cannabis Report.
I'm Curtis Emery, a bud tender from Resonate in Worcester, Massachusetts, with the Bay State Report for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. Monumental news out of Massachusetts as the CCC has officially voted to move forward with its highly anticipated social consumption framework. The late hours of its session last Tuesday, the CCC voted to move forward with the framework. The framework includes 3 licenses: supplemental, hospitality, and event organizer licenses. The CCC also divulged information on just how these licenses will be divvied up across the state. For the first 5 years of social consumption here in Mass, the licenses will be given to companies registered with the CCC Social Equity Program, micro businesses, and craft cooperatives. A win for Mass Cannabis. Next step for the framework, it is open to public input with a final vote by the CCC for fall 2025. Another continuing story out of Massachusetts, as 24 cannabis testing companies across the country are suing Massachusetts-based medical equipment manufacturer Revity Health Sciences. A refiling of a suit originally filed in 2021 at the Suffolk Superior Court is claiming $1 billion in damages from Revity Health Sciences. The suit alleges that Revity Health Sciences sold equipment which was not suitable for cannabis testing, as it habitually has flaws in the testing results. The suit also claims that Revity Health Sciences engaged in fraudulent marketing and sales practices, offering solutions that the equipment and the company could just not back up. And that's all from me, Curtis Emery, with a Bay State Report, Cannabis Coast to Coast News.
That'll do it for the A block, our first section of Cannabis Coast to Coast news for this week. Up next are international reports from England, Europe, and Canada. And another European nation decriminalizes the plant. Cannabis Coast to Coast news continues after this break.
Your cannabis business could be overpaying by hundreds of thousands of dollars in federal income taxes because of one simple assumption that you're making about your accountant. A dispensary owner in Colorado called me frustrated as hell. He'd been working with the same accountant for 3 years. His accountant said, "What's 471C?" Here's what the ignorance of that accountant was costing this business owner: $180,000 every single year for 3 years. 471C has been around since 2017. We're talking about an 8-year-old tax provision that many cannabis CPAs don't fully understand. 471C is one of the most complex and highly debated tax strategies in the cannabis industry. If you want to make sure you're not leaving any money on the table, I'm offering free 471C reviews this month. Link in the description.
Accounting Buds has grown into Buds Group, the same award-winning quality, now with more service offerings. Buds Group, your best buds in the biz.
Looking for PR that over-delivers on expectations? At Maverick Public Relations, they pair big agency experience with personalized attention. From launching award-winning brands to securing top-tier media hits, their data-driven communications team helps visionary leaders and entrepreneurs rise above the media noise. Maverick PR is responsive, collaborative, and relentless about results and ROI. Visit themaverickpr.com and make headlines together.
If you want to make history, if you want to be part of history, if you want to say you helped legalize marijuana in America, now is the time to join us.
Welcome back to Cannabis Coast to Coast News. This is the B block, or second section of our news show. I'm Alaina Pinto. There is another European country entering the legal space of cannabis. This time, it's the country of Turkey that has decriminalized low THC cannabis products. Now, only licensed pharmacies will be allowed to distribute the plant medicine, but there will be health products, supplements, and personal care items for sale and by prescription. The Ministry of Agriculture will regulate the growers, and the Ministry of Health will set up regulations for the licensing, processing, and sales. You will have to get a doctor, though, to write a prescription for you to take to those licensed dispensaries in that country in order to get your medicine. With more from across the pond, here's Ben Stevens, the editor of the Business of Cannabis, with the European Cannabis Report.
I'm Ben Stevens, the editor of Business of Cannabis, with this week's report from Europe for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. More and more European governments are acknowledging a simple fact, that cannabis prohibition has largely failed to reduce use or dismantle illegal markets. In response, an increasing number of countries are rethinking their approach. The Czech Republic, as an example, which we've spoken about extensively in the past, continues to move ahead with partial legalization. But now even more cannabis conservative countries like Turkey are introducing restricted access for things like medical cannabis. Now Slovenia is taking its own step toward reform. Lawmakers from the ruling coalition, made up of the Freedom Movement and the Left, have introduced a bill to regulate personal cannabis use. Natasha Sukic, a member of parliament from the Left, says this proposal reflects the will of the people. She pointed to the volumes of data suggesting that cannabis poses no greater health risk than legal substances like alcohol and tobacco. The bill is designed not just to regulate use, but to help remove stigma surrounding it. The draft legislation follows a non-binding referendum held in the 2024 European elections, where a narrow majority of voters supported the legalization of cannabis for personal use, and a large majority backed legal cultivation for medical purposes. If passed, the new law would allow adults to grow a limited number of cannabis plants, carry small amounts in public, and possess larger quantities at home, as seen in Germany. While sales would remain banned, individuals could share cannabis in small amounts without payment. A separate law passed in June already permits private companies to grow cannabis for medical use under license. The bill also addresses road safety and workplace rights. THC for drivers would be strictly enforced, with escalating fines from 300 to 1,200 euros based on concentration levels. Police would be authorised to test drivers, but employers would be barred from drug testing employees for cannabis, citing consumer protection laws. Despite backing from the coalition, the proposal is yet to win over all government partners. The Social Democrats have not endorsed the bill and is expected to undergo further public consultation and revision before a final vote. That's all from me this week. I am Ben Stevens, the editor of Business of Cannabis, reporting for Cannabis Coast to Coast News.
I'm Dave Barton from Thermador with your UK Cannabis Report for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. In an interview earlier this week, head of Curaleaf UK, Jonathan Hodgson, expressed concerns around access to medical cannabis, stating that we need to do a better job getting a clear, unified message out to the wider public, adding that the messaging isn't always reaching the mainstream. He went on to outline what he thinks are the major barriers to increasing patient numbers here in Britain. These include awareness, understanding, and mainstream media reporting, which he described as not having evolved. Hopeful that the UK's patient numbers could double in the next 12 to 24 months, Hodgson also stated that most people becoming patients now face fewer delays, better continuity of supply, more choice, better quality, improved service levels, and better affordability too. However, he says very little about trying to better understand the UK patient community or those self-medicating via the illicit market, estimated to be around 1.8 million people. The UK's medical cannabis market has shown consistent growth over the last 2 years, with some clinics reporting double-digit growth month on month. New NHS stats corroborate this too, with some 300,000 items being prescribed between April 23 and 24, more than double the previous year. That's all for this week's UK Report. I'm Dave Barton from Thermador reporting for Cannabis Coast to Coast News.
This is Debbie Facey with the Canadian Coast to Coast Cannabis News Report. So what we have in Canada this week is the HMRA, so the Canadian Health Regulatory Agency has put out a much more updated guidance when it comes to the pesticides they're going to be utilizing within the cannabis and hemp industry. We want to make sure that when it comes to inhalation, it is being overall successful, but overall becoming unharmful to our overall system. So what they are now not only introducing, but they are putting into effect is that each company has a 2-year compliance of being able to do the proper studies when it comes to their pesticides being used within their facility. Also, their biopesticides, so their secondaries, aren't necessarily exempted, but they aren't going to be something that is going to be as needed underneath the compliance, which means that this is going to be helping most of the cannabis that is going to be produced within Canada a little bit more cleaner due to the fact of an overall pesticide look on what is going to be better for the plants, but going to be more healthier for our overall bodies, especially when it comes to smoking and vaping. So when it comes to Canada's news this week, this is Debbie Facey with the Canadian Coast to Coast Cannabis News Report. Peace.
Back here in the United States, the tiny state of Delaware has opened its adult use sales last Friday. The state is allowing all the existing medical dispensaries to open its doors to adult use sales. Their governor, Matt Meyer, toured a dispensary this past week in anticipation of the opening on August 1st. Their governor shared this quote: Delaware has taken a major step forward by launching a legal adult use cannabis market that prioritizes equity, safety, and accountability. This new industry will generate critical revenue to strengthen our schools, infrastructure, and public health systems, while creating real opportunities for entrepreneurs. This revenue also gives us a powerful tool to invest in the communities most impacted by the war on drugs, addressing past wrongs. Unquote. In the meantime, Virginia continues to limp along with a medical-only program, but advocates are hoping that when their veto-happy Governor Glenn Youngkin finishes his term, his successor will support the legislative efforts that created a bill for a legal adult use market. That's the bill that Youngkin vetoed twice during his term. Joe Parsons is confident change will come soon. Here's his Virginia report for this week.
I'm Joe Parsons with the Virginia Cannabis Connection from Higher Education's Coffee Talk, sponsored by 97.5 through WV, and reporting from Cannabis Coast to Coast News. I reported last week about the confirmation of Terrence Cole, the former Secretary of Public Safety in Virginia, and now the acting head of the DEA. During the confirmation process, he made a promise to make the rescheduling process of moving cannabis from Schedule 1 on the CSA to Schedule 3 his top priority. If you remember, I said I was a little skeptical. As the story has unfolded over the last week, I was right in my reservations and feelings on the issue. Earlier this week, the DEA released Terry Cole's strategic priorities. They included anti-trafficking enforcement, Mexican cartels, the fentanyl supply chain, drug-fueled violence, and even cryptocurrency and the dark web. In the news release, they stated that Administrator Cole's top priority is to increase the pressure on the drug cartels and combat the deadly drug crisis with urgency and resolve. While reducing cartels is very important, it is miles away from the top priority that he used to be confirmed to his position. Now, only a little more than a week into his job, cannabis has once again been pushed out of the top 10 list, and in the latest press release, it's missing altogether. Cannabis has been wrongfully placed on the same level as LSD and heroin for now 55 years, and the same urgency and resolve should be used to allow for the growing industry to have safe banking, fairness to patients, and allow for more needed medical research that has already been established to continue. We don't know what Terrence Cole will do in the years to come, but as of right now, he has shown the cannabis community that he's nothing more than just smoke and mirrors. Well, that's going to do it for this week from Higher Education's Coffee Talk, sponsored by 97.5 3WB in Charlottesville, and reporting for WPCM TV's Cannabis Coast to Coast News. I'm Joe Parsons. Until next time, stay lifted.
One more note from Massachusetts. The State Psychiatry Society is endorsing a bill to decriminalize psilocybin possession. There are 1,400 psychiatrists in the Bay State, and this is the first time a psychiatric association has endorsed the drug, which has been hailed as a great tool in battling mental illness. Now let's head down to the Southwest, where our Nevada and Tribal Lands reporter Tina Tasaka reports from every week. This week, she traveled to New Mexico for a trade show, but don't think a change of state will stop her from telling the story from Nevada. This week, she has that and the latest on the rollout on tribal lands. Here's Tina.
I'm Tina Tasaka with 420 Technologies, and this is the Nevada and Tribal Nations report for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. As I'm doing a little roadshow and attending the Cannabis Banking Symposium, I'm reporting remotely from the stunning Santa Ana Star Casino in Bernalillo, New Mexico. This was the first Indian casino when it opened in 1993. This Indian gaming casino, owned by the Pueblo of Santa Ana tribe, is beyond full service with a luxury hotel, conference center, bowling alley, restaurants, casino with 1,300 slots, and the stage at the Star nightclub. This week, cannabis bankers, regulators, credit unions, and CRBs, cannabis-related businesses, came together to talk about the big pain points in cannabis, banking and payment options, due to cannabis leaning heavily on being an all-cash business. Two powerhouses, Association for Cannabis Banking and NASCUS, National Association of State Credit Union Supervisors, came together to continue to build these alliances within the banking community so we can further extend great banking services to all cannabis companies across the U.S. safely, securely, and compliant. In Nevada, the first cannabis-friendly hotel, the Lexi, has accumulated liens for unpaid water, garbage, contractor invoices, room taxes, and a $11.6 million default notice on a loan. Property taxes are 3 years delinquent, totaling about $114,200 plus $36,230 in penalties. The owner, Alex Risk, has decided to sell the hotel to pay the debts. That's it for the Nevada highlights and tribal nations. I'm Tina Tasaka with 420 Technologies and Cannabis Coast to Coast News.
There's another multi-state operator that is in trouble. Ayr Wellness has entered into a restructuring phase and will sell off assets in many states, including Florida, Ohio, Nevada, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and Virginia. As part of this new agreement, Ayr Wellness's seniors shareholders will purchase some of the assets in those states, as well as take on some debt liability. The company is also taking on a $50 million debt liability that will allow operations to continue until the asset sales are completed. Another multi-state operator with a base here in Massachusetts is MaryMed. They announced this week that they are taking over management of Tilt Cultivations and Processing Facility in Pennsylvania. The deal allows MaryMed to take a 12.5% gross revenue fee in exchange for its management team. Next up is the impact on the stock market for cannabis stocks, and here's our man Doug Miller, who is high on Wall Street.
I'm Doug Miller from High on Wall Street with this week's Cannabis Stock Report for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. Fresh forecasts suggest U.S. cannabis sales may top $44 billion in 2025, fueled by adult use expansion in 20-plus states. However, California's proposed 19% excess tax and increased licensing fees have raised alarms. Business leaders warn of a potential extinction event if operating costs rise too steeply. And Aurora Cannabis is making big waves, not in Canada's recreational scene, but on the international stage. The company has fully pivoted to medical cannabis, reporting a 93% year-over-year increase in global medical sales, now outpacing its domestic Canadian revenue. Their annual general meeting is set for August 8th, and all eyes will be on future international moves. Aurora is also earning praise for its Strains for Heroes initiative, donating 5% of its profits to veteran organizations, combining purpose with performance. So let's see what Aurora's stock chart looks like. It is trading around $4.48, and we could see some market pullback for a few weeks, but then it's going to set up and run. So trade smart and lock in those profits. And that's this week's Cannabis Stock Report. Reporting for Cannabis Coast to Coast News, I'm Doug Miller.
One of the most interesting developments in the acceptance of adult use sales of cannabis is the impact on the alcohol industry. Daily use of cannabis has already surpassed daily use of alcohol, and that industry wants to make sure they get in on the THC-infused beverages market. That part of the industry is one of the fastest growing sectors. Two brands that are eyeing investments in cannabis is Constellation Brands and Pernod Ricard. Reuters reports this week that Constellation Brands, which makes Corona and Modelo, are in talks with THC-infused brands, while Pernod Ricard, the makers of Absolute Vodka, has already met with Brez, an infused beverage company. In the Reuters report, though, the first half of this year, United States beer sales are down 6%, and wine and spirit sales are down 5.6% and 9% each. The alcohol industry has the luxury of being able to adapt and even take advantage of the cannabis sector, which is struggling to survive. In the meantime, Oklahoma is continuing to get signatures to launch its ballot initiative for adult use sales in the 2026 election. Here's Kimmie Cannabis with an update from her state.
I am Kimmie Cannabis of Can I Talk About It with the Cannabis Coast to Coast News. I am here at Terp Float 2025 in Tahlequah, Oklahoma. And as you can see or hear, my voice is almost gone because I have been having a blast all weekend. And you can see the floaters behind me. This is one of those times that you want to celebrate with all the bad news and all of the things in cannabis that we hear about all the time. This is the important stuff that we want to amplify as well. When community and different brands get together, this event has been amazing. You see companies and brands from all over the state, and we get together, we get on the river. It's a family event. We have the best live music here. It has been a whole vibe. So I have a couple people that I would like to bring on and ask them about their Terp Float experience. I am here with a few of our Terp Float. Tell us who you are and why you're here.
I'm Lara. Lara lives loudly on Instagram.
This is Cameron. This is my boo thing.
Hello.
We're here to escape the pressures of life and experience the floating of terps.
You know, what brought you here for that?
So my first time, I actually heard about Terp Float before I ever went. And then I saw that there was an opportunity to volunteer and help out with some brands and stuff in the backgrounds. So Cameron and I actually volunteered, and we came up here and helped and, you know, worked and did a lot of stuff. And we didn't get to float, though. So this is our first time getting to float, and it is wonderful.
It has been amazing. Did you float yesterday when it rained?
Yes, I did. Super wet, super cold, but you know, if you had the rain gear like this hat, it helped a lot. I will say this as well, from last year or 2 years ago when we were here before, the staff has stepped up. I think they've done incredible this time as far as people working it. Just a shout out to you guys, been awesome. So thank you guys so much for putting this on this year. And yeah, it's been great. Both days floating, whether it's raining or the sun's out. I've been having a great time.
So let me say this: the volunteers at this Terp Float experience have been working so hard and brought the vibes and the smiles to all of us. So we do want to do a special Can I Talk About It Cannabis Coast to Coast News shout out to all of the volunteers from the Terp Float experience down here, because this has been amazing.
And all the booths are looking awesome. All the booths this year looking great. Everyone's super nice. You know, it's easy to talk to people. Like, the music isn't too loud, you know, at the time, so they give you enough time to go, you know, talk and learn about each booth. So I love that. And yeah, I just think it's more organized this year.
Oh yes, we got a little action. Let's hear it for fire, rescue, police. We are live, folks. Well, that is it from Terp Float 2025. I am Kimmie Cannabis from Cannabis Coast to Coast News. Peace, love, and all that good stuff.
That'll do it for the B block, but we have much more coming up in the final section of our show, including a 3-day festival in San Francisco headlined by Dead Again, the group of remaining members of the Grateful Dead rock band. Their concerts are legendary for the music and the aroma of cannabis that is always part of the experience. But this time, the Dead will be allowing sales and consumption for the first time. We have details coming up next on Cannabis Coast to Coast News.
I am the mayor of the greatest city in the world, and it is my privilege to welcome Dead and Company.
Hi, I'm Tina Tasaka with Oh Yes.
And I am Tanya Griffin with Pro Cannabis Media Coast to Coast.
Jimmy, we met and we wanted to say hello.
Hey, Jimmy.
So we're going to end the conference. Hi, Jimmy.
Thanks to those chronic pain issues, I've been a medical patient in Massachusetts for almost 10 years now. I remember my first trip to a dispensary just outside of Boston, and I told the bud tender I didn't want to smoke it anymore, so I tried edibles, then tinctures, then vaping, and now, if I'm going to smoke, I only use the Weegits filtration system. What? The Weegits.com, Weegits, that's weed, W-E-E-D, G-E-T-S.com, is where you'll find the planet's coolest product that cools the smoke from everyone's favorite flower. Now, the guy that started this was a pretty good medical device manufacturer, and he created this maze pipe that cools the smoking process from 1300 degrees Fahrenheit upon inflammation down to just 90 degrees when it reaches your mouth. That's right, 1300 down to 90. That's why this maze pipe is amazing. So here's how it works. You start with that glass bowl, you flame on, and then you inhale nice and smooth so the smoke goes through 3 different filtration and cooling systems. Now, if pre-rolls is your thing, you can use the Weegits filter that a pre-roll fits into perfectly.
That's right, or even a chillum. The more filters, the smoother the draw. Best of all is the price. You can get all this, or one or the other, for just a few bucks. It'll cool your smoke and you'll give your lungs a break. Now, add in the code of PCMTV and you get 15% off. So just go to Weegits.com and check out the best way to enjoy a cooler smoke with less coughing and hacking and more peace of mind.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the C Block, or final section of Cannabis Coast to Coast News. I'm Alaina Pinto. Final reminder to download our free app at Google Play or the App Store. You can scan the QR code and it will take you right there. If you search it, just don't forget to put a space between the PCM and TV. While you're at it, have you subscribed to our YouTube channel yet? Pro Cannabis Media is still the name of the channel, but we are rebranding to WPCM TV, and we are only 68 away from 16,000, so please subscribe. Everyone here, thanks for your support. We love you. One of our correspondents is one of the biggest pro-cannabis media personalities in Alabama. It's Jennifer Boozer. She hosts a radio show every Monday night called Sweet Home Cannabama on 105.6 FM, and she too has a YouTube channel by that same name. She's been featured in Dr. Bridget Williams' Courage in Cannabis book series, and she owned her own hemp and CBD store before a law changed in her state, and that's when she had to shut it down. That state has been a tad dysfunctional over the past 4 years since their medical program was supposed to start. But amazingly, they still have yet to give out one license, as the process was held up for years with legal proceedings and lawsuits. In the meantime, Jennifer continues to wave the pro-cannabis flag in her home state. Here's her update on her beloved home state of Alabama.
I'm Jennifer Boozer, reporting from Alabama for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. More arrests in the state of Alabama. Jimmy Eugene McDowell Jr., a 68-year-old man from Jefferson County, think Birmingham, was charged with drug trafficking. A tip was called into law enforcement and drone footage was used to see that he had 26 cannabis plants growing on his property. He was arrested and given a $500,000 bond and bailed out on July 31st. Let's compare that to another arrest in Jefferson County this week. A woman working for DHR was arrested. She left a 3-year-old boy in the back seat of her vehicle in front of her home for over 5 hours after forgetting he was there. And sadly, the little boy died. She was given a $30,000 bond. The state of Alabama has decimated the industrial hemp industry with HB 445 shuttering businesses and making citizens into felons, all under the banner of Save the Children, while children all over Alabama are being abused, trafficked, and yes, killed, and no one's protecting them. We're going to unpack these things on Sweet Home Cannabama this Monday night at 7 o'clock. You can join us on FM Talk 106.5 every week, and you can watch us live from the Sweet Home Cannabama YouTube page. This week, we're speaking to Joe Hickey Sr. and comparing how hemp and tobacco are regulated by the federal government. Stay tuned. I'm Jennifer Boozer Stewart, reporting from Alabama for Cannabis Coast to Coast News.
And here's what's happening in New Jersey's cannabis scene. Well, we're following up on an earlier report about New Jersey officially endorsing their cannabis consumption lounges, giving adults a place to actually consume and enjoy their purchases. The first approvals went out to Sunny Tian and High Rollers, both in Atlantic City, and Ginseng Dispensary, located in Mercantville. And Ginseng actually opened its doors early in July 23rd. And just a reminder, everyone must be 21, of course. And for a medical patient, you are kind of lucked out. You can actually bring your own product to the 2 dispensaries, High Rollers and Sunny Tian, and in Atlantic City, and you'll only get charged a $5 fee at High Rollers for bringing your own products. Now, heading up the turnpike, 2 women-owned businesses I wanted to tell you about. Butter Cake, owned by founder and CEO Martha Figaro, is actually taking on investors now. So if you ever wanted to get into the cannabis industry, now's a great time to reach out to them on their social media platforms for more information. And welcome to the neighborhood, Lady L Dispensary, a new woman-owned dispensary in Jersey City on the west side at 547 West Side Avenue. Has their grand opening coming up in September, soft opening going on now. There's plenty to enjoy there besides the beautiful art decorated space. And you've got delivery, you've got a host of great product selections there. And so I hope to see you there. I'm Jill with the New Jersey Report for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. Thanks for watching. See you next time.
In many states that are just opening their medical or adult use sales, two things happen on a regular basis. First, emergency room visits increase more, and most state regulations and social media censorship will not allow any educational messages that are positive about the plant to share content on their site. But the second thing that has happened far too often is bad actors who use predatory business practices to take advantage of the licensing process. It happened in Fall River, Massachusetts, when the mayor there ended up going to federal jail on bribery and fraud charges. But now in Connecticut, the Attorney General, William Tong, has filed a $2.5 million lawsuit against, quote, Make CT Better LLC. The AG is alleging that the two owners, Michael Tedesco of Fairfield and Zafir Iqbal of Hartford, promised to deliver cannabis licenses, but they did so with forged documents. These guys scammed 70 businesses out of $25,000 to $30,000 in fees each, with promises to ease access to the licensing process in that relatively new adult use state. No such issue in Maryland, at least as of yet. Here's Christopher Bright with our Maryland Cannabis Report.
I'm Christopher Bright from the Enlightened Voice. Welcome to Cannabis Coast to Coast News. I'll be bringing you the latest cannabis headlines from Maryland. In Cumberland, Maryland, workers at the Apothecarium, a dispensary owned by TerrAscend, are raising alarms after exposure to paint fumes caused serious health issues. Employees reported headaches, nausea, and dizziness, and also vomiting after painting occurred without proper ventilation or prior notice. Many were unable to finish their shifts or return to work, forced to use personal paid time off to recover. Complaints have been filed with Maryland and federal OSHA, triggering an active investigation. Workers have also contacted elected officials and workers' comp lawyers. Safety data sheets requesting during the initial July 2nd incident weren't provided until late July, despite legal requirements. A union air quality monitor later detected high levels of harmful compounds during a second painting incident on July 1st, which the company disputed. Amid an ongoing labor dispute, UFCW Local 27, representing the workers, demands a halt to indoor chemical use without third-party clearance, restoration of used PTO, and immediate contract negotiations. And now we have our content creator of the week. I would like to shine a spotlight on Sonny from Strain Chaser Sonny. His reviews of Maryland cannabis products is both informative and entertaining. One of the most consistent reviewers. When he is alone, he's funny, but when his friends join in, it's a great time. Check him out on his IG or YouTube at Strain Chaser Sonny. And that's all for this week's Maryland Cannabis Report. I'm Christopher Bright from the Enlightened Voice, reporting for Cannabis Coast to Coast News.
What's up, everybody? I'm Mark Allen, the Chicago Clone Guy, reporting from just outside of Chicago, Illinois, for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. Thanks for tuning in. This is Bird. Always something going on here in Chicagoland. Apparently, there's going to be a new dispensary being opened up by 10 retired cops. Yep, 10 retired cops came up with, about $6 to $10 million to sell drugs through now. So they spent decades throwing people in jail for weed, and now they're going to make money off of it. That's great. But hey, that's business. That's how it goes here, anywhere. Other news that I find very interesting is that there are outdoor grows going on commercially, outdoor cannabis grows in Illinois. But there's only been 2, but now there's going to be 3. But the problem is the state is trying to shut down the third outdoor grow pretty much citing the fact that they can't conform to keeping the facility locked up and protected and enclosed. So that company is Curaleaf. So Curaleaf is now suing the state of Illinois, the Illinois Department of Agriculture, just like Green Thumb Industries and Nature's Grace and Wellness did to keep their outdoor grows, and they're pretty much in hoop houses, kind of like a screen tent is what they're calling them. But Curaleaf is suing the state of Illinois to grow outdoor. Another interesting aspect of this, the state required Green Thumb Industries and Nature's Grace and Wellness to get hemp permits to grow outdoor weed. Very interesting to know that, because I am a hemp farmer also trying to figure this out. So Illinois is getting sued now for letting some people do the same things they're not going to let other people do. But it looks like the path is kind of clear now. Things are opening up. Maybe I'll be reporting on my outdoor cannabis grow soon. Time will tell. But I am Mark Allen, the Chicago Clone Guy, reporting for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. Thanks for tuning in.
Now let's go to the left coast in Washington state, where they are finally getting around to allowing their dispensaries the opportunity to use debit cards inside their legally licensed stores. Here's Matthew Friedlander with more.
I'm Matthew Friedlander with Scheduler Annex, coming to you with the Washington State Cannabis Report, Cannabis Coast to Coast. I am reporting today from the Minority Cannabis Business Association's Equity Workshop Tour. I am down in Seattle. We are being hosted at the Somal Credit Union headquarters. They are one of the few banks here in Washington State that will do business with the cannabis industry. Access to capital and banking is obviously a huge issue for every cannabis business here in the country. It was a great conversation today, especially good to hear from some voices that we don't normally hear from. New perspectives are always good, and today's topic was about the economics of cannabis. In particular, how this affects minority cannabis-owned businesses and the new equity licensings that are coming online in many states across the nation. Here in Washington, we have a new round of equity retail licenses coming out in the process right now. So, again, great conversation to have. Great group of people. Always love getting together with our cannabis community here in Washington State. So that's what I've got for you this week out of Washington. This is Matthew reporting for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.
I'm Marianne from Alibi with the Oregon Cannabis Report for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. Many of Oregon's cannabis businesses are struggling with unpaid receivables. The OLCC, our regulators, have steadfastly refused to intervene, saying that they don't want to have anything to do with licensee-to-licensee disputes. This has created challenges as licenses are often transferred or sold and the debt's not resolved with the sale. There have been instances where unscrupulous operators will transfer their license to a family member just to get out of paying off the debts. The regulators and the legislature are now open to working on this issue. Licensees and the Oregon Cannabis Trade Association, CHOW, are now developing plans and brainstorming ideas around a solution. Stay tuned as this progresses. I'm hoping for a solution that will help licensees and all related businesses. That's the Oregon Cannabis Report. I'm Marianne from Alibi with Cannabis Coast to Coast News.
The state of Kentucky has started to grow cannabis for sale in its new medical program. Half plants arrived in greenhouses last week, and now regulators are predicting that the market could open as soon as October. With more from her home state, here's Robin Alford.
I am Robin Alford reporting for Cannabis Coast to Coast News, coming to you with the Kentucky Cannabis Report. Governor Andy Beshear sent a letter to Donald Trump to finish rescheduling what President Biden had gotten started. And we are hoping that when Governor Beshear is turned out, that he will run for president. I sent him a letter to encourage him to do that. I'm hoping he will. And there will be a dispensary opening in Ohio County in Beaver Dam. That is area that I know very well, Paul. Yeah. And they will open on North Main Street in Beaver Dam, and it will be this fall when they do that. And they're probably shooting for November, hopefully. And that will be it. And this is Robin Alford coming at you with the Cannabis Coast to Coast News, reporting for Kentucky.
I'm Christina Brisson with Over the Top Renovations with your weekly Ohio Cannabis report with Cannabis Coast to Coast News. As you know, things have stalled the last few weeks here in the government before they went on their summer break, but I'm happy to say that Representatives Callender and Fisher have been going against their party and standing up for what voters approved initially with Issue 2. Fisher has been known to say that thumbing the nose at voters is absolutely a non-starter, and Callender said he'd rather take 6 months to get it right. Additionally, as all this is going on, we still have 135 cities that have a ban or moratorium against adult use cannabis. So let's hope this is all going to change. Everybody speak up, go to events, say what you mean, and thank you, Ohio. This is Christina Brisson with Over the Top Renovations with your weekly Ohio Cannabis report with Cannabis Coast to Coast News.
We have a new reporter from one of the newest states to pass adult use, Minnesota. Alicia Bellamy from Herbs and Herbs is going to be reporting from that new state, and she is hoping to get her license in the next few months. Here's Alicia.
I am Alicia Bellamy for Minnesota Cannabis News Report. I am a lucky recipient of my preliminary pre-approval for a micro cannabis license. I have 18 months to get it on and get going. I am so happy to be able to start a dispensary in my home state of Minnesota. I love Minnesota, and I can't wait to be able to give you guys premium products and to make my own edibles. On July 22nd, we had 569 applicants apply for their retail license, and 75 lucky lottery winners won, which is the first step for adult use cannabis dispensaries across the state of Minnesota. Also on August 1st, we have an event license open for applications. And with that, people that want to have cannabis events can start having their events through the OCM. Also, the testing facilities are open for applications. I am Alicia Bellamy, reporting for Cannabis Coast to Coast News.
And finally tonight, there's a saying from the 20th century. There's nothing like going to a Grateful Dead concert. The San Francisco-born rock band led by the late legendary Jerry Garcia has always been associated with the counterculture of the 60s. This weekend, they celebrate their 60th anniversary in San Francisco, where it all began. And now that some members of that band have passed on, originals like Bob Weir and Mickey Hart carry on as a group called Dead Again. John Mayer has joined them on a first guitar, and this coming weekend, the 60th anniversary festival will be allowing sales and consumption of cannabis, legal for adults over 21. So, despite the smell and consumption of cannabis has always been part of the Dead experience, this weekend it will all be legal. Of course, with 3-day tickets going for over $600, you might need to catch a buzz to just enjoy the ride and the vibe. All right, that's this week's Cannabis Coast to Coast News. I'm Alaina Pinto. Remember, it's a whole new world of weed out there, so consume it responsibly, and we will see you next time.
I think I messed up. Did you know there's a place that covers all the cannabis news you need? Pro Cannabis Media is now WPCM TV, your go-to website for things cannabis. WPCM TV is the CNBC of weed, bringing you the latest news you need.
Amy Carter. This week, she reports from inside the State House in Lansing.
I'm Amy Carter from Michigan Weedsters with this week's Michigan report for Cannabis Coast to Coast News.
And talk shows about all things cannabis.
Well, thank you, and thank you for all you're doing to get the word out. Like, this show is so important.
It all started back in 2018 when Emmy award-winning talk show host Jimmy Young kicked it off with the In the Weeds podcast.
That it's not just any generic paper towel. You do have a brand that you use, right?
Yeah, we live or die by the bounty. I mean,
The quicker picker-upper! I love that!
His mission? Building an army of multimedia journalists and podcast hosts who are documenting the fight to end cannabis prohibition in this country and around the world. Fast forward to today, and we've got the nation's only weekly cannabis coast-to-coast news program with Alaina Pinto.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to this week's Cannabis Coast to Coast News, WPCM TV's weekly production of the fight to end cannabis prohibition in this country and around the world. I'm Alaina Pinto.
Delivering the nation's only TV news-style program. Since June 2021, WPCM TV has racked up over 1.3 million views with 17 million impressions and picked up over 16,000 subscribers on YouTube alone. Now we even have our own app. For more information, contact the team at WPCMTV.com.